Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for a completely different episode of Warhammer Weekly, since we're not going to talk about Warhammer at all this week. Instead, we're going to talk about Majestic 13. That's right, everybody. It's a takeover show. That's what's happening. I've got Tom here. What's up, Tom?
Hello, friends.
I've also got Adam with me. Adam, how you doing?
Not too bad.
All right, fantastic. So we are. I am currently on the road, in case that's not obvious, but the show must go on. And so early show today. It's actually very late where I am. I'm over in Europe, but of course, where you are, it's the middle of the day. So hey, Europe friendly show today, everybody. Hope you all enjoy. Today we're going to talk about Majestic 13, our newest game from Snarling Badger. And we're going to take your questions. I'll be watching your questions in the chat. So if you've got any about the game, anything you want us to answer, hit those up. But we're just going to talk about the game, the process, what we're excited about, that kind of thing. And so before Tom and I get into stories, Tom was the developer on this again, who did a lot of good work in helping me correct numbers. This is a very complicated game to balance, and just because of the nature of the thing. But first, just for those who don't know, Adam, hey, what is Majestic 13? Why don't you give him the pitch?
Sure. So back in 1947, there was a crash in Roswell, New Mexico, of an alien spaceship and all that jazz. And people have heard of that generally before. And it's very frequently known as the beginning of kind of the UFO kind of, era to some degree. That being said, there was actually a crash in 1941 in Missouri in a place called Cape Girardeau. And it's also kind of known. You find information about it on the internet. This is not a thing that we made up, but it's lesser known. And there's another conspiracy theory out there that has to do with aliens and stuff, that after the Roswell crash, Harry Truman, President Truman, got this group of 12 powerful men in the military and business and intelligence agencies and all that kind of stuff together and formed this group called Majestic 12. Now, whether this is true or not, no one actually knows. But in the Snarling Badger reality, we're going to say yes, it was. But it's not the group that we're talking about in our game. Our group in the game is called Majestic 13. Majestic 12 kind of failed because, at the very least, if you try to do a vote, it's very easy to split when there's 12 people. So you got to have at least another person in there. And plus, those were just 12 guys, basically. And Majestic 13 is 13 organizations, 13 separate organizations that are trying to protect the Earth from the Alien Menace. These organizations, otherwise known as maybe as factions, if you want to get into it that way,
Sure.
basically you have a group of 5 models. You have a team of 5 in your group, and you pick a faction, and then you go and fight aliens. And very frequently in the battles, it is 5 against 1. You are basically fighting one big kind of alien creature, and the 5 of you are doing that. It is generally designed to be played in the modern era. Or near future, if you want to get down that road. Though this last weekend at TMX, I talked to a couple different people who were like, so this started back in the 40s, right? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, so I could definitely make my models look like they were from the 60s if I wanted to. And we're like, sure, you could do that if you wanted to as well. It depends on what you got going on. So again, it's miniature agnostic. It is designed to be played solo, co-op. Also, you can play versus, basically military exercises, team versus team, not fighting aliens at all. And let's see what else. Like I said, miniature agnostic, you can use whatever kind of models you want. You're basically just looking for something that looks kind of like modern military soldiers with even like normal looking guns, because though the guns they carry look normal, so that if people see them, they're just like, I don't know, some military guys. They have a lot of technology built into these guns that are using reverse engineered stuff that they take from the aliens, so they're actually much more powerful and all that kind of stuff. So it's basically a game of, if you ever played XCOM or ever watched X-Files, it's kind of those two things squished together.
Yeah, exactly. The other things that I would mention that are important and relevant are, obviously there's a full campaign mode to it. It uses sort of programmatically generated scenarios, and then at sort of intervals throughout the scenarios you encounter where you're fighting these alien monsters, theoretically going all over the area to fight them. The story shows up, of course. That is to say, there is an intelligence, namely this Alien Menace force is the name of it, or it's the code name that Majestic 13 has given it. They don't know what it actually is called or who they are, but force will basically take a hand and show up and attack you in your base or ambush you and those sorts of things. So all told, it'll play a pretty long campaign. It's meant to run over, basically 18 plus games before it's concluded. So it's quite a lengthy sort of campaign experience if you go that direction. So that's sort of the basic rundown of the thing. There's also base building in it, and lots of fun equipment that you get to kit out everybody with and stuff like that. And we're gonna just talk about it tonight, share some stories, but mostly we want to answer your questions. So if you've got questions, drop them in the chat. Happy to answer those. So Mayabi actually asked one already, and Adam, this is an interesting one because I know you have an answer for this. Here's my big question. How did you know this was going to be so timely with the big push recently that the U.S. has non-human aircraft intact in their possession, or that all the UFO stuff basically that's come up recently, right?
I mean, I've been interested in kind of UFO stuff. I don't know what I think about it yet necessarily, particularly, but I do keeping my eye on that stuff. Literally half an hour ago, I just tweeted out about a video that I saw from Fox 26 News out of Houston about a ex Air Force guy who basically gave a whole bunch of documents to Congress and said, hey, this is a bunch of documents that prove that we're holding on to UFOs and craft and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like flipping through my YouTube on the TV there, and I was like, wait, what? And so I shared that on the Snarling Badger Twitter, I believe. Or yeah, it was either the Snarling Badger Twitter or the Tabletop Minions Twitter. But yeah, it is, we've kind of been hearing about all of this, edging more and more towards that type of I don't want to say disclosure necessarily, but we're heading in that direction a little bit. That's been going on for the last couple of years.
At least 2017.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, when I say couple of years, I always forget about the pandemic. Time is a flat circle. But yeah, no, for a while now, it's been going on. And it's definitely a situation of I'll be very, very honest with you. I kind of came up with a name for this game and then tried to figure out what the game should be like. I was just and I do that a lot. I'm just I came up with the title. I'm like, oh, Majestic 13. Oh, it's kind of spooky. And then and then I said to Vince, I was like, hey, I got this idea. And then, well, here we are. So yeah, it's definitely as far as the limited number of models that you are playing with, I really dig that. You have a team of 5. You always have a team of 5. If you lose a guy or 2 or whatever, there's clones back at the base. It's fine. They may not be necessarily, exactly the same, but they're pretty close. And it's okay. If you spend a bunch of money on tattoos and then you get killed, then you're going to have to get those tattoos put back on again, I think. I don't think that's how clones work.
Yeah, that's not how clones work.
So watch out for that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny because it really has just sort of come up in the news recently a lot, all the UFO stuff, and all these people are like, that's some really great viral marketing, and I'm like, it couldn't be better timed, right? So
I know, absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, we just need a bunch of aliens to land someplace big and just start doing alien stuff or whatever, and we'll be like, thank you, I guess. I don't know.
Majestic 13 marketing in full effect. Yeah.
Indeed.
Patrick Kellis said, is the game 100% cooperative, or are there some PvP elements? So it's solo, co-op, and versus, Patrick. So that's to say you can play it alone. You can play it cooperatively with your friends. You can also run it as PvP. The way that's written in the book is, you're exactly what Adam said. You're taking your 2 teams against each other. Now, technically, there's also no reason why you couldn't put a person in charge of one of the alien monsters, and the other person is just playing the alien monster. They're not gonna, they would there's limitations in their actions as to what they can and can't do. So as long as those were heeded, they could override, as it were, the normal enemy AI. We didn't test to that. That's not It's not that'd be an off-label usage.
That's not an endorsed. Yeah,
Right.
so
Right,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
not an endorsed play style, but you could do it.
But you could do it.
It's your game. You can do what you want. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Like
it just may not work. That's all.
Well, the enemies are the enemies. They have certain capabilities. Like it's going to be harder for the good guys, as it were, right? Because the monsters, when you can't learn their sort of AI and tricks and rotations and plan accordingly, some of them are really tough, and that's intentional. Because you're sort of supposed to be able to figure out how they're going to operate and then make smart moves to counter them because they're very, very, very powerful and deadly. So, yeah. Dougie Fresh said, "Would this be a good game to introduce with friends, family to miniature war games?" I mean, I'll give my general answer to that, but I want everybody to give a shot at that as to what they think. My answer is we write all of our games to be friendly to new players. No matter where you are in your journey, like we try to write that so it's easy enough that you can get a hold of it, learn how to play it very quickly and simply, but also that there's enough complexity, like what I just explained there, that over time you can learn how to okay, this is how the monsters are going to move, what they're going to do. I can make the right plays to survive this, and you can sort of skill up. That there's both a low floor and a high ceiling is what we're always aiming for. So I mean, if people like Aliens and cool XCOM, Men in Black stuff, X-File stuff, then sure. It's oftentimes I find with games it's more about the concept grabbing them than it is about the rules of the play. But Tom, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, the other thing that I would add is that there's tons of replayability to this. Like that's one of the things that struck me in testing. Makes it really difficult to test when you begin to look at just all the permutation of not only for building your force, but also just as you are going into scenarios and the way in which the scenario sets up, the foobar happens, and the actual alien that you're facing off against, like it has like significant replayability. And so I say that just to say that like there are some games that you would buy that once you've done it a couple times, you get a feel for what this game is and what the experience is. With this game, I mean, you could play this for a year probably and not get tired of it.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny quick aside, and then Adam, I want your take on it. When I was filming the Bat Rep, okay, and I was rolling for the bureaucracy event, the first time I rolled a 13. And 13 on the bureaucracy event is a second alien monster is added to the fight. And I was like, nope. I cut the footage and it was just like re-rolled because I was like, I'm not doing this Bat Rep with something that's so unusual, right? But that is within the play experience for you to have a second alien wander in. Like over the course of a campaign, that's going to happen, right? Whether through the foobar event or whether through bureaucracy beforehand, like it will occur and it will be a heck of a tough fight. Right, but I didn't want to do it as
there's
like
nothing
here's the example Bat Rep.
There's simply nothing like going in and just spending your first couple turns trying to get away.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like like finding yourself in a scenario where like, just let me out. I want to leave you alone, alien.
Just trying to call for aid and evac as fast as you can. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You can have this whole area. I'm going to go.
This is your home now.
Yeah. As far as being something that's decent to get people involved in it early on, introductions. I think that as the person who's the gaming advocate in the situation, it's pretty easy because you've got two choices for co-op. You can either be like, you take these 2 models on the team, and I'll take these 3 models on the team, and we work as one team versus the thing. Yeah. Or, it's not very difficult for you as, again, the gaming advocate to be able to paint up 2 small teams of 5. We didn't want to make it a thing where there's a lot of models on it aside. And we're never really planning on making any army style games particularly. We're generally always kind of erring more towards the side of skirmish size. So it's a little bit easier, for you to be like, I have enough stuff here. Again, whether you want to split a team or whether you want to have 2 teams. Now, if you have 2 teams, generally you're fighting against 2 aliens. But as long as you're not making like a full campaign out of it and trying to make it a whole thing, if you're also trying to introduce to somebody too, you could have 2 teams go against 1 alien. You'll take them out relatively quick, I suppose, but they would get the hang of like the play loop and all that kind of stuff. And there's that's fine too. So there's a lot of different ways you can get people involved and kind of teach them the game without adding too much peril and that kind of stuff, and then they can have hopefully a good time.
Yeah. Uh, so then let's see here. Mayabi said base building, like awesome, and he asked, that was his favorite part in County Road Z. What is your favorite part of the base building mechanic? Yeah, I'll tell you. So the base building is pretty robust. It happens over time, but it's also very hard to plan for. By that, what I mean is you make requisitions for equipment and base upgrades, but you don't necessarily get them. Like most things, they have to go through bureaucracy. The better you perform in the mission, in any individual mission, the better chances you have of your requests being fulfilled. And the base itself, the bases both have a lot of interesting sort of interaction with the outside of the game elements. So your post-game processes where they weigh the most heavily, as well as like special missions, i.e. when you're ambushed in your base, that's sort of where they sort of have a big hand. And the way you choose to expand your base will say a lot about your team and its capabilities, because here's a simple example. You could try to push into sort of advanced, unusual technology and research and end up with a team that has like jump jets and is capable of a lot of utility and movement and stuff like that. And that could be a very potent way that your team, sort of deals with the Alien Menace. You could also push into upgrades that are just like straight up weapons and damage, right? Just like better guns, better killing. And your team deals with like every alien is a nail and you've brought a big hammer, right? So it's going to define a lot about how your team sort of operates in the long run over the course of a game. Tom, what do you think? Did I miss anything there?
Yeah, I mean, what I would just say is that, like, you list that, and yet the variability amongst the aliens is so significant at times that, like, your mobility in some instances will simply mean nothing, right? Or your big hammer you will just not have the tools needed, right, for this nail. And so one thing that struck me about it was that there's no I'm proud of this in this sense, and I think Vince did an initial good job even in the design process. There's no like one size fits all track, right? Like there's no one path towards victory of building any one army or any one any one faction, because simply there is so much variability in the experience itself that that a lot of things will work a lot of the time, but not always.
I think that the hope is that you never end up having a net list. You know what I mean? Like something where people just go online and go, "Oh, well, this is the way you win," because that makes the game relatively, uninteresting. There are so many different ways to play and different play styles that we always like to have lots of ways for you to customize the way that things are, the way that your team is done, from the different organizations, the factions. You've got 13 choices there, obviously. You've got all kinds of different equipment. You've got all that kind of different stuff. And then as you get into the base building, you've got a lot of options there. And some of those options, at least one of those options, is not available to you unless you take the specific, faction. And then there's another bunch of like add-ons to the bases that are only available if you take this certain base expansion, and you can potentially get these breakthroughs. So there's a lot of kind of branching that goes on in there and gives you a lot of variability. Again, if you run through the entire campaign and you want to do it again, you can completely change things. It'll be a very different game.
Yeah, agreed. One thing other to note, just for everybody watching, don't forget to put your questions into the chat. We're going to try to do our best to answer all of them. If you're curious about the game, down in the description there are links for everything, including Adam's like very quick flyover walkthrough video. I have my full bat rep listed down there. I have the website itself down there where there are downloads like your crew sheet, or sorry, your team sheet.
Team sheet.
There you go, team sheet. Yeah, we were joking about this because 3 different games, 3 different groups, they all have different names. Your team sheet.
Cabals, crews, and teams now, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to run out of synonyms by the time we get to like game 5. Everything's down there, as well as to order the book. All that's linked there. And for the first time, what we've done with the game is actually introduce a supplementary game aid that is completely optional as well. So for all of the monsters, as well as all the base building, there is a set of cards you can order. They're really nice, high quality cards. They're printed on tarot size cards. And there's a single pack you order. It has all the monsters, So stats on the front, abilities on the back, and then there's the base sheets. And so you can just like actually physically build your base on the table and easily reference any bonuses that you have. I really like having the cards. It also makes it fun to do things like, oh, let me generate the monster. Shuffle, 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 flip. We're fighting this guy. As a point of fact, when I ran the demo at TMX, that's exactly what I did. And just to harken back to what you said earlier about co-op, I had 5 people playing in the demo that I ran, and that was just one person took each team member, right? And so it was like, okay, you're the commander, this is this guy, and so on and so forth, right? And so all 5 people just literally took their turn, and it was fine. It played great. Like it felt like any kind of, I don't know, D&D experience or something like that, right? Like no different. Okay.
Simon asked, my hard copy just got shipped today, very reasonable shipping cost to Germany even. The reason for that is because we have the company that we work with that we do the printing through. It's all print on demand. So when you order it and they make it, they're not pre-printed sitting in a warehouse. But there's a facility in the United States and there's also one in the UK. So people in the UK and Europe are getting it shipped there, are printed there and then shipped not very far. People in the United States, Canada, etc., are getting it shipped closer to home. We hope that someday they have one like in Australia or someplace like that. But for right now, at least the 2 facilities does save on people overseas ordering as far as shipping is concerned. It's considerably cheaper then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Walkabout Games said, I love the 13 factions. How did you come up with them? Some are so different. I'll give you the honest story. Here you go. This is the behind the scenes director's cut footage. So no offense to Adam here, but he did come to me with less on this one than he has in the past. As far as like you came with Rain and Hell as a pretty, like you had a pretty good idea of what you wanted out of it, right? I mean, like I built on it some, and we worked back and forth like always. But you kind of came to me. I think
you still came. But you still came to me. You still came up with the philosophies for Rain and Hell.
Right. Correct.
Like, yeah, but I was like, I think that we have to have philosophy. We talked about that, but you're the one that came up with 6 different philosophies. And in this situation, I was like, there should be 13 factions. And so, there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in this one, the honest answer is a couple times a year, my wife and I go away to a bed and breakfast in Amish country. This is like a weekend vacation we do. It's not very far from where I live. And the reason I go there is because there's no internet, no cell phone service, nothing. There is no connection to the outside world. It's fantastic. And what I often do is work on the book pretty exhaustively while I'm up there. Like Kathy will go to bed and I'll stay up for a while, a couple hours, 3 hours, whatever, and just sit there and in silence or listening to the same sort of song over and over again. I'll work on the book. And one night back last year when we went up there in the fall, I sat down and just started thinking about like, okay, what would all of these look like? And then just started sketching out ideas, right? And writing these things up of like, who would be the usual suspects, right? If you were trying to put together these power brokers within society. And that's sort of what I came to. And I think I initially cut it to out of the original list I created, which was a little more than 13, I think I cut to the 13 that we ended up actually using in the final. I don't think we ended up switching any of them out. So
we kicked around the idea initially of only having 12 factions and then having the ability for you to build your own 13th faction. And then we were like, no, let's not do that. That seems like that 13th faction could get real squirrely on us potentially. So we decided, yeah.
And so, the 13 factions, I wanted them to play very differently, to have very different abilities. And I think what excites me about it is, for the most part, when I look through there, like when I've obviously built multiple crews myself, both in testing and then built a new thing for Bat Rep and built a new thing to run demos and on again. And every time I'm like, I'm going to try this one. This one seems fun. And like, they're, even though I'm the one who wrote them, I'm still interested in playing them all, which I think is good. So yeah, there you go. Okay. All right. Okay. Simon Ranke, page 118, PDF, The Deranger Enemy. It speaks of clearing conditions with the psionic keyword. I didn't find keywords attached to conditions. Is it meant to be a condition caused by a psionic attack? Yes. Probably a good answer for a frequently asked question or something, to clarify that. But yeah, exactly. Like so when you're looking at an attack, it will say this attack has the psionic keyword basically in the attack.
Well,
and like if it's a psionic monster and if it's a psionic
It has a
attack.
psionic type.
Yes,
It'll have this the way they attack has a psionic type.
correct.
And so the assumption is that conditions that are granted by attacks that have that type have that keyword.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So
It's just
anything that is a
really
psionic labeled attack, or if it's an area attack, it'll say at the end this attack has the psionic keyword. It'll say both. One of those two things. So anything that comes from there. Okay, good.
Terrier Halo said, I have not checked shipping for the cards to here, but I do love cards. The downside about the cards is that there's only one facility that prints the cards. And I think it's here in the States. And it's not the same people that do the books. So getting the cards shipped overseas, we've had some people come back and go, the shipping is more expensive than the cards. So it depends on where you live, but just keep that in mind that the cards, the other downside is that you can't order the book and the cards together, because even though they're both on the same website, they get produced separately. It's a kind of a glitchy, weird thing, but we've had a talk with the folks and they're like hoping that they could eventually fix that in some fashion. But for right now, they are kind of separate. So
yep, absolutely. Kathy asked, do you really like it when your wife comes along on these trips? Yes, dear. I love it. Absolutely. I always prefer to have you along. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, as I said, put any questions you've got about the game in the chat. What do you want to know? We've got the game queued up over here as well. This is obviously the thing. We'll just take a look here while we're waiting for some more questions to roll in, and just kind of show everybody a little bit of the vibe of the book. Because what I want to do here is I want to actually, this was an interesting game. In our previous books, we worked with other artists and people to put stuff together and images for it, but as this was more of a modern setting and it needed to have more of like a government redacted document feel to it, well, guess what? Adam did all the work, so we just piled it all on Adam. So Adam, talk about making all the art for this, because you really had some creative stuff here with doing this art.
Yeah, well, the idea that I had in my head when I kind of came up with the game as well is also that this was going to be from the point of view of some sort of conspiracy theorist who's been collecting images and documents through Freedom of Information Act or whatever kind of weird back channels and things like that. And that this would be a document about this is what Majestic 13 is about. So all of the images and things like that are in this book are not just like, I mean, I got most everything from stock photos. There's actually a couple pictures in there that I actually took of things. There's a Geiger counter in there that I needed a picture of for the equipment page. So I just grabbed my Geiger counter because of course I have a Geiger counter, and I took a picture of that. And but for the most of the stuff, it is either me photoshopping pieces together from different stock photo things from different services that I pay a subscription for to be able to use, royalty free, this and that and the other thing. But even then, once I get an image, then I didn't just want to go, well, here's the image. I wanted to look like it was a photograph that had been taken that was sitting on top of, like, the texture of all the pages it's got that kind of like bad photocopy texture along the edges, and that's intentional. And then pretty much all the pictures look like an actual picture that is actually set on that page. So there's a little bit of a shadow. Sometimes the corners are a little dog-eared. Sometimes there's a stamp on them and all that kind of stuff. So doing all of that myself it took a long time, but the upside is that as I did layout first, I mean, we had the text, it was all finished and proofed and everything with Tyler and also my wife. And then I laid it all out and then found out where all the spots were. Like sometimes the section ends and it's halfway down the page, and the next section, I could start it on this part, but I could also start it on the next page over. Now I have a hole this size. What do I fill it with? When we work with other artists, I have a finite amount of art at the beginning, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to have to figure this out. In this situation, I could always just be like, oh, I'll just make whatever I want and stick it in there to make it relate to whatever and all that kind of stuff. And that worked really, really well, and I'm really happy with the look of it. That being said, it did take a really, really long time.
Sure.
But the thing was, we also didn't have that much time because we knew we wanted to launch the day before TMX. So it was just a lot of like, I did that from the time that I got up in the morning, and then I would till pretty much near bedtime, unless I had like a stream or some other thing I had to do. But yeah, it was a lot of work over about 3-ish weeks, I think. But I'm very happy with the way it turned out and looked. And I was concerned that some of the printing might look a little weird because we had some issues with Rain in Hell. We had to send, get the initial proof and then do it again because we had to go back and change some things. So now on the third book, I think I've got it dialed in enough that we didn't have to do a proof on, something being too light that you can't see it, or too dark that it gets all muddy and that kind of stuff. So overall, I'm very happy with how things turned out, and I like the look of it. But next book, we're going to work with illustrators again.
Yeah, we've already got some people lined up for the next one. Very excited, but stay tuned for more on that in the future. All right. Okay. I can answer this one pretty quickly. Califax 512, any plans on releasing STL's models for this game or taking this route for future games? So for this game, no. But we do have a blog post up right now on basically majestic13game.com. And again, link is down below in the description. The blog post is there and will... and it gives you a list of like, hey, here's a bunch of soldier models that we think would be good for this, from like pre-printed models and 3D printers and all sorts of stuff like that. So big giant list you can go reference, and hopefully we've grabbed a wide selection of different vendors and everything like that, from very well known stuff to what I think pretty small shops and 3D printers and things. So certainly we want to always help out folks who might be newer or who might not be aware of all the models that are available out there with some easy options. Now, will we ever do it for this game? No, it just doesn't really make sense for us to get in the business of trying to craft soldiers or stuff like that. Will we ever do it in the future? Maybe, if the game sort of demands it or is right for it. Like if we ever do make that robot squirrel game, then we're going to have to make robot squirrel STLs.
It's true. Yeah. Or if we ever make a game of sentient cello cases that go into battle, we already got a guy for that, actually. So at TMX this weekend, one of the attendees had sculpted up an entire squad of 5 different guys that look like my wife's cello case back there, and it's a long story. If you don't watch the Every Other Sunday show, you may not know about Nick Raimondo back there, but it's a whole thing. And he showed up with a squad of 5 of them, and it was amazing. And then Vince used him in the demo.
Yeah, I used him as the squad for the team for the demo game. Unfortunately, the dog died. But they did win. That demo game, by the way, was very funny because they defeated the alien on the last activation of the last turn. It dropped by 1 hit point. It was great. You couldn't ask.
That happens sometimes.
Yeah. You couldn't ask.
That happens sometimes.
Okay. Michael Melnick said, "Can you briefly describe how the basic mechanics work?" Sure. So there is a video down below, Mike. Just if you want to see another sort of shorter explanation, you can. Uncle Adam's video is linked down below that walks you through sort of the basics of this. It's also linked on the website, so you can check it out there. There's a short sort of primary loop playthrough video, but not to make people click away from this. I don't want you to do that. But I'm just as supplementary information. If anyone's curious, we did make videos of all this stuff so that way people would have easy reference for it. How's it work? Sure. In simplest form, there are 5 stats. Okay. Acuity, combat, dexterity, fortitude, and psionic. In general, most monsters and human psionic is 0, and so not really worried about. So you got 4 stats. Each stat governs some basic function of the game. Acuity is your sort of initiative and helping you spot enemies. Combat is how you attack. Dexterity is your movement speed / avoiding dexterity-based conditions. And fortitude determines your hit points as well as avoiding fortitude-based conditions. Pretty basic way this works is everything in the game uses d20s and d6s to make a combat attack roll. Like let's say you're a soldier, it has a gun and is going to shoot the alien monster. You roll a d20, you add your combat score. If that total, like your stat, and that total equals or exceeds the enemy's defense, then you have successfully hit and roll your damage, which is generally going to be some number of d6s. That's pretty straightforward. If you roll a 20, it's a critical and you double all damage. If you roll a 1, you always fail. There are situations where you can get into states of advanced critical or both hit and failure, where you can successfully critical on a 19 or 20 or fail on a 1 or 2. Usually that comes from having conditions applied and stuff like that. But in simplest form, that's it. It's a basic stat check system, so it's using a d20 plus the actual stat, the number, at some sort of target number you're rolling at. That basically shortest and simplest explanation. The variance comes in both your team because you actually roll to generate the stats of your team, like you roll dice. It is a flat number plus dice. So you always, basically, your team starts with every stat being some number between 7 and 17, as determined on 5 plus 2d6. And so you'll see variance across the team as to what they're good at. And so you don't pick roles first. You can sort of like assign afterward. In general, what I've done whenever I make teams and in my testing, I was like, okay, well, here's the guy with the low combat. Welcome to being a medic, or something like that. Like instantly, that guy's the medic, but there are things you're doing besides just moving around and attacking. When a player activates a team member, there's sort of lots of things that you may be able to do or want to do, including just move around the board for secondary objectives. Obviously, attack or try to kill the enemy. Protect, so that is to say, like, you can actually take a protect action where you're trying to shield a teammate from some kind of damage or effect. You can help them, so that's using med kits or various and sundry equipment on them to remove conditions, that kind of thing. Pretty simple system of 4 conditions in the game, 2 of which are dexterity based, 2 of which are fortitude based. They're always locked to those things. They're very easy for you to sort of get your head around and understand exactly what's happening. So you can just you don't have to memorize 50,000 different conditions or whatever. The monster might be using alien goo or slime or, punching you through the chest with sharp needles or something. But in the end, it's going to amount to 1 of 4 static conditions. So, yeah, there you go. Did I miss anything there? Tom, did I miss anything?
Just the play routine is based on
on the acuity.
On acuity. Sorry,
right.
I wanted to say initiative, and I knew that my that was not correct. Yes, yeah. On the acuity, and so the sequencing is going to be based on that, the activations, and so there is going to be some variability depending on where the alien sits in that priority in any one encounter. And your general routine is like clearing conditions, moving, and then taking an action, and that can be anything from attacking to helping team members or protecting team members, or even calling for aid,
or moving again,
or moving again. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so calling for aid is a special action that you can do basically once per game that has a special effect, and sometimes that call for aid is to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. Yeah, mm-hmm. And it was really important to us when designing this. And this is, something Adam really hammered me on a lot in the beginning, and that was making sure that, hey, if we're going to do this, if it's going to be a sort of, asymmetrical game, many on one, right? We've got to make sure that there's lots of interesting options. This isn't just stand still and shoot the bad guy, right? So we really, it's a high movement game. The aliens move very far. Your people move very far in general. It has high movement speeds vis-a-vis the board space. And that's because we wanted it to feel quite fast-paced, quite mobile. You're moving around the board, trying to complete secondary objectives, trying to get to certain places, get the alien to move or not move in certain ways in response to you, standard sort of military tactics. You're trying to flush somebody out of position, so you kind of move up into cover and flank them so that then the enemy will move a given direction. Those kinds of things all actually very much work and are the expected play mode in this game, because that's what the enemy AI is going to react to. So sort of the more like a tactical team of specialized soldiers you play, the better you'll do, I guess, effectively. So,
mm-hmm. And to some degree that came out in playtesting as well, as far as the mobility, and because sometimes the AI early on was sort of just hunkering down a little bit, and so we'd spend some time on the 3 different types of monsters trying to figure out how to make them act a little bit differently and do things to make it a little bit more interesting, and to frankly put the teams in peril a little bit more often too. So
yep
yeah, the AI is something that it took a lot of work to mm-hmm. make sure that it didn't get caught in loops and cycles, right. Because it's a lot more difficult than you might anticipate.
Yeah,
I think that's why so many different games are made to be just basically 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2. When you start working on solo and co-op, you have to make an AI if you're going to be playing against something, and it's actually sort of a pain. So yeah, it would, to make it work right. It's definitely a thing. Waffles Enjoyer asks, what kind of terrain setups are recommended? Basically, we're looking at either wilderness or urban. So wilderness could be woods, forests. It could be desert. It could be meadows. I mean, there's all kinds of different possibilities as far as that's concerned.
Still buildings,
You do
ruins,
want,
rocks, whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, or yeah, rocky outcrops, trees, things like that. Whereas urban is going to be obviously a little bit more buildings and roads and dumpsters and scattered terrain and things like that.
Although
Yeah,
still
and there's
nature.
a high kind of yeah, indeed, and there's quite a high variability even amongst the terrain like size pieces that you'll need, and so that was like I would just be prepared. Like if you don't have an entire shelf's worth of terrain, you'll likely need to mix and match.
Yeah,
Sure.
and which is fine. I tried to leave a lot of the when you generate the terrain as part of the sort of scenario generation. I tried to be pretty open with it, like a D3 pieces of terrain like this, or like this, or like this, right? Like say, okay, anything of this type is going to work, right? So I didn't want to railroad people to be like, you have to put one 4x4 building that's no more than 6 inches tall. Like, no, we're not doing that. We're never going to do that. Like we understand people have incredibly varying setups, and terrain is often a barrier, so we're always going to try to keep it pretty open. Yeah. Okay.
But all that to say that terrain is an intimate part of this game. Like it is something that is a very important part. And so
the game doesn't work well if you're just basically kind of out in the open.
Right.
Some games can a little bit, but this one, yeah, you want to have stuff out there.
Right. And the AI itself for the monsters are taking into account things like cover.
Right. Yep. It wants the aliens want to go to cover, hide in cover, all sorts of different things that different aliens are going to respond to. Yep. MDB Boyd said, I have 5 unpainted Blake Sevens Federation troop minis. Convenient. Any tips on alien minis? Adam, what have you been recommending for alien minis?
So I'm working on a blog post which will go up soon. There's currently a blog post on the news section on the Sterling Badger website, which talks about the teams and the places that Vince referenced that before. I'm working on a second blog post that'll go up probably later part of this week that will be about aliens and where you could take a look at. The aliens that I've been using, the ones that you see in the video, if you watch the video, those are both, I think, either D&D or Pathfinder creatures. They are from WizKids. Those, if you go to the game store and they got all those blister packs on the wall, all those kind of gray primed plastic minis. I just looked for 2 that looked like they could be potentially aliens, and then I sprayed them with Turbo Dork color shift colors because aliens are, iridescent. Why not? And I went from there, honestly. So really, I've been saying since the game has launched that anything can be an alien as long as you believe in yourself. So I think that it's important just to find basically the right base size. Most of the creatures are between 40 and 60 is what it says on the cards for them or in the stats. So as long as your creatures are between a 40 and 60 millimeter base, then you can use whatever you want. Now, would you use an orc who's got a giant axe and is covered in furs? I mean, you could. We're not going to tell you, obviously, not to. It doesn't particularly look alien per se, but it depends on what your definition of alien is. So the ones that are in the
he is
the ones that are in the video. Yeah, that's true. The ones that are in the video, I think one of them is either called a wizard killer or a mage killer. He's the one that's got he's on kind of claw feet and stuff and got the weird dreadlocks. And the other one is, I don't know what that guy is, but he kind of reminds me of a giant frog. But I painted him purple because I didn't want him to look like a giant frog. So yeah, honestly, pretty much any kind of creatures like those. If you're into 3D printing, then the world's your oyster. You can find all kinds of amazing things. But just look at something and go, does this look like it's a scary kind of, monster that doesn't look too, Dungeons and Dragons or something like that? And then you're pretty much fine. Again, even if it's sci-fi, if it's a creature, but it's got some pseudo robotic stuff on it, that's totally cool as well.
Absolutely. And
for D&D, I would say for D&D, my favorites were like Umber Hulks.
Sure.
And stuff like that. Just big, weird alien things. Carapaces, super fan of those. From GW, things like Tyranids.
Tyranids would work great.
There's lots of options there.
War Games Atlantic right now has got a series of kind of alien bug creature things called strikers. I forget what they're called, but they're on they're going to be in my blog post as well. But yeah, they're multi-part plastics and they're great. They're not exactly Starship Troopers alien bugs, but they're kind of close-ish.
Yeah. By the way, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and do all those things. Obviously, normally every week to week we'll still talk about Warhammer, but this week we're just talking all about Majestic 13. But Don't let that not change you. Or yeah, still hit the buttons. I don't know. It still says the thing up there. Buttons are fun.
Buttons
Okay,
are fun.
they're fun. Absolutely. All right. Approximately how much time does each mission take to play out at the table? 30 to 45 minutes is the general average of time. It might take a little more, might take a little less, depending on exactly where you are. But 30 to 45 minutes per play session is the goal from setup to post. And so the battle report that's on my channel is fairly lightly edited. Like I said, I didn't cut that much out, and that's about 38 minutes. Right, and I had already set up the board and the terrain, but that's pretty much where we're at. So, and that I was going
Someone
a little
asked-
slower to actually make it reasonable what I was doing. Go ahead.
Someone asked also how many missions it takes to save the Earth, and it's generally the campaign. If I remember correctly, it's about 18 missions, right?
Correct.
It is.
Correct.
Yep, 18.
Yeah.
Yes, it's about 18 missions long to save the Earth. And that's or
That's
fail
Or
to
not.
save the Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody asked in there. Oh, hey, what's up there? What's up, Chair? I see MCXL is in the chat. What's up, Evan? He said, I'm looking at the Leviathan box next to me and thinking about how good these big nids would be as the alien threat. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
As an aside,
yeah, good.
okay, I'd say just from a soldier standpoint, and even some of the aliens, some of my favorite ones are actually the Reaper Bones Chronoscope miniatures. They're cheap. They're like a couple bucks, $2-3. They have some great soldiers. The IMEF soldiers with various military TAC gear. And again, you're talking $2 a model, $3 a model. And they have a number of them that are real good fits for aliens as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Let's see. Okay. Next question.
Mikey R asked if does the AI account for the power difference between one team of 5 or 2? If you end up playing a co-op game and you've got 2 teams of 5, then you're usually going up against 2 monsters.
Yeah, which is more than a linear increase in power, by the way, because the monsters usually are additive to each other in very dangerous ways, especially when they start overlapping potential area attacks and then stacking conditions.
And status effects.
Yes.
Yep.
Like things get real hairy real fast. So yes, the game is meant to respond to that situation. Like 2 enemies is not 1 + 1 scary. It's like 1 + 1 + 1 scary effectively. Like somehow 1 + 1 makes 3 effectively. So it is meant to respond to that ramp in power that the players will have. Terrier Halo said, feels like Majestic 13 can easily be hacked into an RPG. The stat checks are already there. Sure. And somebody asked, like, are we ever going to write an RPG? Well, so first off, I already wrote an RPG. It's called the Narrative Game System. You can check it out. It's the big giant picture that's usually behind me when I'm at home. That's the RPG book I wrote back in 2014 or something. So if you like really, really narrative games with very light rules, yes.
Which could be adapted to the Majestic 13 world.
Yeah, I mean, if you like really light rules and very narrative-focused RPGs, then this is the game for you, because I promise you, you're not ready for how light the rules touch is in this game. But at any rate, will Adam and I ever write an RPG? I don't know. I wouldn't say anything's impossible, but it's not really our focus. Like, Adam and I have the shared love of skirmish war games, and it's really where we want to be. As we've shown, we're not afraid to incorporate RPG elements into these games, campaign mode, and the sort of progression mechanics and things like that.
I would say, if anything, I'm more afraid of making a game that doesn't have campaign mode.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like making like a competitive style kind of game that's way over my head, because that's not how I play. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Matthew W., what major lesson have you learned from Space Station Zero or Reign in Hell that you have applied to this game? Well, that's interesting. You asked that. Most of the lessons we've learned are actually meta lessons. So what I mean by that is it's not like the game design components. By the way, somebody earlier asked, I'm sorry, I kept missing the question. Somebody earlier asked, is there a static game design resource that I would recommend, like books and stuff like that? Not really, unfortunately, for designing role-playing games. There are a couple of video game books that are pretty good. I'll try to link those down in the show notes afterward. But those are basically where you have to go. There's been lots of books written about good video game design, and if you go and look at those, you can oftentimes extract pretty vital lessons. Mark Rosewater's famous 20 Lessons for Game Design is sort of a good Bible. It's actually delivered like a TED Talk video. You can just look up 20 Lessons from Mark Rosewater from Magic the Gathering, but most of those lessons just apply across all types of games.
I think Rick Priestley wrote a book with somebody else about designing war games.
He did. He did.
Yeah.
I don't love it, but yeah.
Oh, I think I have it, but I don't know that I've gone that far through it.
I mean, he's a seminal creator. I'm not trying to bash the guy. Like, he's an incredible creator, right? And obviously, he's responsible for a lot of things. He's the person who incepted Rogue Trader and Warhammer 40,000. I just don't love that particular book, but it's not bad. It's just not my cup of tea. But I think that's because he is more war game focused in it, and I've always looked at it as more like game design to me is like a holistic thing. Like, in the end, it doesn't really matter what you're trying to design. There are certain lessons you have to internalize, and the rest just becomes engineering around the specifics of understanding what the is this for a card game, or like what's the user experience going to be. Okay. So what did we learn? Yeah, sure, lots of stuff, man. Oh my gosh, we learned so much from the first two games. Like, have a bat rep up on day one. That's a good lesson. I just learned another lesson here from putting this one up. Listen to the entire bat rep up on YouTube to make sure it doesn't go silent at minute 8.5, and you have to reprocess the video and re-upload it when you're supposed to be driving to the airport for a flight and horribly inconvenience your wife. That's an important lesson I learned. But yeah, like, collecting the FAQ questions is something we do consistently now. Having like our planning and launch and all of that, like, we've really formalized a lot of the process that we go through. Like, we have a sort of standard Gantt chart, or, that I create of like, this is when we need to be done with this thing by this date, and we build in due dates and times and everything like that. A lot of the
we learned
go ahead.
We learned that we shouldn't have the game come out the day before TMX.
Yeah.
That's probably not necessarily a great idea. We might want to put a week in between there next year. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, like, so a lot of the stuff is just sort of those meta lessons of like what we need to do to provide ourselves with the time, the space to do this properly and provide a high quality product, because that is our chief focus. Like, we want to provide a high quality, like, relatively low cost, fun experience that's going to give you, lots and lots of hours of fun playability. That's always been the goal with our games. Like, deliver a great game at a great price. And the iron triangle always applies, right? You can have it good, you can have it cheap, you can have it fast, but you only get 2 out of the 3, right? And so for us, the part that has to be cut is fast. Like, we want to make it good, we want to make it cheap, so we know we have to take our time, right? And so that's what we've really built in a lot. Like, we've moved back when we start working on games, way back, how we concept them and work them back and forth and stuff like that.
And we could still use more time on things like development.
Yeah, sure. Which the next one will have. I mean, every time we're learning and continuing to inspect and adapt. Like, I already have the schedule for our sort of next couple projects built out. Jim Crimmins, how much did the OG game Ogre inspire this iteration, if at all? Great question. Ogre is sort of a classic asymmetrical thing. Adam, I mean, I know it was something that you're familiar with. I've never played the game, is the short answer.
Yeah, I played the game back in the day, and I have the most recent version. I did the Kickstarter that came in a literally 27-pound box that doesn't fit under the bed. But it is definitely kind of it gave me a bit of an idea. Like, instead of being like, let's have, a group of aliens versus a group of humans run around and fight, that part of what made me go, I think it would be interesting to have one alien and then a bunch of people fighting it, or one alien and maybe a couple of sport folks or something like that, was predominantly because of games like Ogre. And I don't know a ton of other asymmetric games out there, but I'm sure there are some. But that's the one that I know the most about. So that was something that definitely was like, I think if we headed in that direction to some degree, I think that'd be kind of an interesting play experience.
Yep, absolutely. And so, like, I like I said, I've never played Ogre, but I'm fascinated by different sort of game modes. You'll see more of that explored over time as we continue to make additional games. But this just felt like a pretty natural sort of the way to do it. So the question became, and if you look at my early notes, there's a lot of like drawings and charts and things like that, where I actually try to map out like graphically what a fight would look like against one monster, and how do we keep it interesting, and where are the like points of high interest and low interest and stuff like that. So I'm like, I try to, when I'm in early concept phase, I'm doing a lot of work that isn't necessarily what you would think of as traditional game design. Like, I'm literally drawing pictures of what I think a battlefield would look like, or something like that, and like, where would figures move, and what's going to be interesting, and how much space do they need to have, and things like that. Okay. How many figs do you need for the alien force encounters? It varies, but That might be a good thing for us to eventually put up a list as well. So we'll put together a blog post around that. But in general, I want to say that it caps at what, 8 of
6,
any
I
one
think.
particular type. Is there still?
Maybe 8.
I think in the
I'm looking at a
finite
bunch of
counter, you
them
have
in
8
here.
of a single type. But
Yeah, that may be the case.
it's basically 3 different sort of force aliens, I think, and then there's different numbers for each. Like the toughest, the biggest, toughest ones, you'd never need more than 2, and then the middle ones it's like 4 or 6, and then I think the littlest ones it gets up to 8 at the high end encounter. I don't have the book sitting right in front of me. I apologize, everybody. Obviously, I'm on the road, but it's
You get the PDF. You could go to the.
Oh yeah, I suppose I could.
Uh,
I do have it right here in front of me.
Yeah, the PDF is the last page is 99.
Yeah, I do have this right in front of me. How about that? I don't want to spoil anything for people. That's the issue, because they're all going to see this as well.
Well, the one there on page 100, it says that which is the number of enemies. It says that there's 6 4-strike team members per team participating in the mission. So
Okay, there you go.
I haven't found one that says 8 yet, but there might be.
Okay, then I
one.
must have lowered it to 6. I couldn't remember where it capped at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil any of the story missions for everybody. That was my only concern there with doing it live. But the in general, like we'll do a little blog post where we'll put up kind of this is the maximum amount of stuff you need, but it's not large. That's probably the most figs you need, because obviously you could play the whole game. You could go have 1 alien fig and your 5 guys and play the vast majority of the scenarios, and you just keep reusing the same alien fig. I wouldn't necessarily find that compelling, but who knows? Everybody,
you could do 3.
Taste.
There are 3 archetypes, right?
Sure.
So you could do 3, like a certain model for each of the different archetypes, right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
The minimum I would probably have would be 8. Right, which
Yeah.
would be your 5 soldiers and your 1 of each archetype of alien.
Yep.
Like that's where I would start, and then for the campaign you may need more.
Absolutely. Okay. So like, let's see. Simon Ranky said, really like the fact that guns don't have a range. Really speeds up gameplay and feels more realistic. Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with relatively short areas here. Like, this is not a huge amount of space. This is played on a 3 foot by 3 foot board. Somebody else asked, how do we come up with that? It was just the correct size board for the amount of movement we wanted to have, given the size of the aliens and the size of the encounters. Like, it's a mathematical equation, effectively. Like, we first looked at, can we keep the 22 by 30 we did the previous 2 games on, and with the sort of movement speeds we want and the way the numbers worked, it just didn't actually pan out. It was too small of a space, so 3 foot by 3 foot became the right answer. Now, like, on that kind of a space, if you take a human, you assume it's 6 foot tall, like 6 foot an inch, and you lay it sideways, the types of weapons we're talking about here are lethal at like that full distance. We are not out of lethal range, even close, right?
I mean, effective being able to hit effectively with a pistol might be potentially like half range in real world, maybe. But alien technology, boom, that takes care of it right there. That's that's the whole thing right there.
Yeah, especially when we're dealing with potentially retech and advanced technology.
Exactly. I
was listening to I was watching a special, and there was like an interview with a sniper, and he was talking about having somebody in his sights at 297 yards, and he's like, "No, I can hit a dime under these weather conditions with this humidity at 297 yards, right?" And I'm like, well, that is a lot farther than what we're dealing with here, right? And this dude's hitting something the size of a dime. So yeah, and that's the kind of soldier that would be in this kind of a team, right? That sort of dude. Okay. Will the cards be available as a PDF for download and local printing? I don't think we have a way to turn that on. I believe we can only make them physically printed. I don't think we have a way I don't think they have a way to actually let us sell just the PDF file. So I'm not sure.
No. Yeah, they don't seem to. Initially I thought we could, but like each PDF each page of the PDF is a separate card, and so like if you were to print them, then it would take up an entire piece of paper. Plus, I don't know how you double side it. There's we have to upload it a specific way to them so they make it work in their machine properly. But they don't have any. I don't think there's any way to just buy a PDF on drive-through cards. But we can look into it. This card deck for us was honestly kind of a bit of a proof of concept. We want to be able to see. I'm not necessarily a big card guy when I'm playing. I like to have my stuff on a sheet generally, but other people, Vince reminded me several times that I'm not everybody, which is true. And we designed these cards for the people who like that kind of thing. And if you don't like that kind of thing, we got those sheets you can download off the website. But going forward, you will very probably see more of this, and so we wanted to kind of get this one underneath us and figure out, okay, how does it work? What are we doing? What do we need to change in the future? Stuff like that.
Yeah. So we'll certainly look into it. I don't think it's a service they make available through that site, unfortunately, at this time. But we'll check. Do you have a retailer code set up for stores wanting to carry Majestic 13? Adam, you want to take that one on how retailers work?
Yeah, I will, but I don't have it yet. If you go to the website, down at the very bottom of the footer, there's a thing that says retailer portal, I believe. And in there's a form you can fill out. And currently it just says you want to get either So there's a little thing a drop down that says you would like to buy Rain in Hell or Space Station Zero, or get a code for both, which I have to generate 2 codes because they're different prices. So I'm going to have to figure out how to add to that. Like, because maybe someone only wants Majestic 12 and Space Stations. I'll have to make it probably radio buttons instead of a drop down. But yeah, I'm going to add that very soon, and then it'll be available for people to purchase. Basically, you get a code, and then you buy it at a discounted price from them, and then they ship it to you.
Yep, exactly. All right. Oh, yeah. So Terrence Milter said, thanks for giving an excuse to roll some D20s. How did you come to choose this die, roll versus the others? Well, there's a whole sidebar in there in the book that literally says why D20s. I thought you guys only use D12s because it was the right die for this mathematically. I actually started wanting to use D12s, or sorry, D10s. I apologize, because I still wanted to throw people off the scent. I'm a contrarian, and I thought, well, maybe D10s would be I've always wanted to use D10s in a game. They're a fun die. But it just didn't work mathematically. When you map the way that we wanted stats to work against the variance that was necessary, and so how can we control, what's the actual variance that you're allotting for there vis-a-vis the enemy stats and the player stats, the D20 was just the right die for creating the correct amount of variance, because you're trying to balance how much is being determined by the RNG versus how much can you sort of map and will fall within a certain case. So what percentages do your success scenarios map against on average versus your failure states, those kinds of things. So that's basically the sort of math that we're doing. And the D20 was just the correct die for that in this particular case. So Tom, anything else you want to say about that? Oh, go ahead.
I know some people think that it's D20s are real swingy, but sometimes life is kind of swingy. You know what I mean? Sure. So I don't have a problem with that either. As a non-mather, it doesn't bother me too much. But yeah,
math is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't want to belabor the point, but math ultimately is going to be the answer.
Yep. I mean, and that's always where we're going to make the decisions, right? It's not, we're never going to make it because in the end, I'll start with an idea because I think it sounds cool, but in the end, the thing we go with will be, it's the right answer for the play experience, and mathematically what's going to provide the most sort of rewarding, positive play experience, no matter what I happen to like. I'm not married to anything I ever write. Tom kills my darlings all the time, and that's perfectly fine. And he tells me, there's a fun moment. I'll share a little fun behind the scenes moment actually from the previous game. When we were developing Space Station Zero, so when Tom was doing the development and testing, he came to me and he was like, hey, you got a problem. I was like, what's that? He's like, well, you can't actually beat this challenge. You wrote a challenge that's literally impossible. It kills everybody instantly. And I was like, oops. It seemed cool at the time. But that's why we do the development work. Okay. Let's see. Okay. The front cover is too terrifying for me. I'm thinking of playing with Toy Story aliens, the Claw and Green Army Men. Yeah, I mean, it is ironic that we made a game that you could actually legitimately use Green Army Men on as your sort of your figures and stuff like that, and that would be perfectly reasonable. So they're even basically the right size. So yeah.
And if you did Toy Story stuff, you could use Rex potentially as one of your aliens alongside the little claw aliens, and there are lots of options there.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Albion FC. I just brought Frostgrave for the mini agnostic nature and was going to look out for a sci-fi version so I can take advantage of my monstrous 40k collection. How similar is this system? Well, I'll be honest, if you want something like that's very, very similar, or similar-ish from the same creator, Stargrave, right, would be
Stargrave.
would be the easy answer. Not that I'm trying to talk you out of buying, our game. I certainly hope you do. But Stargrave, he does make Stargrave as well. Now, how similar is this? Actually, there are some overlaps. This is the closest sort of experience, I suppose, to something like Frostgrave, just because it's using a D20, because of the way it works with stats and stat checks and things like that. So there are some parallels there. It is obviously also very different in many cases, being that you're talking about an asymmetric experience generally. So the many against one big bad alien, things like the activations are somewhat different in the way things activate. There's certainly very notable differences, but it's not a completely dissimilar experience. Is the shortest thing I would say. Like it's you're in the same zip code. You're not going to a different state or anything like that. Different, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Terrier Halo, was roll under versus roll over ever a consideration during the design? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yes. I actually started with mechanics, with making this a complete roll under mechanic game. Some of my earliest initial design was exploring, could we do a total roll under game where like the higher your stack gets, the easier it gets to roll under it, right? There are various and sundry reasons why I didn't do that. That runs into certain problems with certainly like opposed interactions become much more problematic on roll under systems, because then you have to like calculate deltas of comparatives. I beat it by 15. Well, I only beat it by 12. Okay, so and down by 15 wins, right? There's a couple other things that get in the way, but yeah, I did explore that. Like there could eventually. I like roll under systems. I think they're a lot of fun to play around with. Being somebody who came into gaming in 1989 playing second edition Dungeons and Dragons, there's plenty of roll under mechanics in there, right? So I'm not gonna say we'll never use them, but no, I never. It just didn't work for this game. Okay, Shadow Sun or Shadow Sun. Does the system roll multiple dice or single few dice? I really like many dice for a more predictable distribution. Okay, so in general, you're gonna for most resolutions, you're rolling a single d20. Okay, sometimes you'll roll 2 and take the best. Sometimes you'll roll 2 and take the worst. But so it's not generally a lot of dice. Now, damage-wise, it might be a higher number of dice, like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dice, something like that. Mm-hmm. But I want to talk about distribution percentages. To go back to what Adam said earlier about the swinginess of the D20. The D20 is very swingy in something like D&D when you're rolling a D20 and your bonus is +5. It's very common sort of to hit bonus for like a first level character, right? So if you think about the size of the bonus versus the size of the variance on the die, it's a pretty direct mapping. Like your bonus is 25% of the variance size of the die, right? It can generate 20 results, you have +5. So your potential results are 6 through 26, right? Okay. Now, the result set only matters when then compared against what's the kind of target number you're aiming for, right? So if my results are 6 through 26 and my successful target number is sort of dead in the middle of that often, then it's going to feel like a very swingy experience, because 50% of the time I'm going to end up above it and 50% of the time I'm going to end up below it, right? Mm-hmm. The way that our stats work, because you're using the entire stat, so like often your bonus will be something like in the range of like 9 to 15 realistically. Could be higher. In the bat rep, for example, my commander rolled like bonkers good stats, and then I made him a veteran commander because he just rolled so hot. Dude dropped multiple 10s and 11s, Tom, and then I was like, well, he's got to be a veteran. I'm up in those stats more. Yeah. This dude's a hoss, right? Yeah. Like when you generate Arnold, it's you go for it, right? He's just there in Predator, ready to rock and roll. So because the size of the bonus is larger, it represents a much bigger percentage of the variance space, right? Now, in the end, you still have 20 potential results, But then through the development, we were able to then much better calibrate what are the success states, right? So if you're ending up in a success state in a higher percentage of the time, and you can know that reliably, right, then you don't feel the variances heavily. So that's what I'll say. Tom, what did I miss there? Anything?
No, I mean, that's like a lot of, I don't want to say this. When you don't have a designer hat on or a developer hat on, you're not reflecting on those ranges, and I think that it's easy to miss the experience. Sorry. Go ahead. So, yeah.
So the variance is much more controlled, is what I'll say.
Yeah.
Yep. Tom is dying. We'll give him a minute to recover. All right. What scale do you recommend for Majestic 13? Would the bigger Tyranid monsters be suitable for the aliens? Depends on what you mean by bigger. There's quite a lot of bigger Tyranids. Some of them get like real wild. But yes, most of the bigger yeah, exactly. Like if you're talking about like the giant Forge World ones, that's probably too big. But like most of the bigger ones in Leviathan, for example, like the brain bug and the snappy four-limbed guy, like yeah, sure, all that stuff's fine. They're all about the right size.
Generally, we're usually trying to stay within 40 to 60 millimeters on the base round, and the normal scale to the game is generally 28 millimeter scale. So it's the same type of scale as something like 40K or Age of Sigmar and lots of things that are related to that type of game. I would say that you could play with, say, Marvel characters or the new Star Wars Shatterpoint characters. They're 40 millimeter, so they're a bit taller, but that won't bother. As long as the base size to your team is about 25 to 40 millimeter, and as long as the monsters are 40 to 60 millimeter, you should be fine.
Yep.
Yeah. I want to jump in. You skipped a comment from Dougie Fresh. Just said he liked the idea of a Kobayashi Maru test mission where there's no win. Well, Dougie, let me encourage you that this is probably the game for you then, because depending on your roles, there will be some missions that you cannot win.
Yeah, it is possible to like a horrible bureaucracy roll to end up fighting like 3 aliens at once, and then round 1 you roll the foobar and you roll a 13 and a 4th alien jumps in. Like that is a possibility. It's statistically highly unlikely. Yes. That is a 1 in 8,000. Does that sound right? Yeah, 1 in 8,000. Where that'll happen, but it can happen. And when that happens, that is a no-win scenario. That is as no-win as it gets. 4 alien monsters hit the board, you are dead.
That's when you back out.
You back immediately. Like you call for raid, round 1. Every character calls for raid and runs and hides.
Well, and you choose who you're going to sacrifice, right? Like you're now running people off to try to get them, like feeding them to the aliens to keep them away from the bulk, right, of your soldiers to the best you're able to, right? Because each are going to be running on different AI.
Yeah.
And again, you've got clones back at base, but again, when you are in the post-game process and you're rolling to see, well, what do I got to do with clones? You're going to be in a situation where maybe you get a bad clone, or there's all kinds of different things on that chart you got to be able to be wary of.
Exactly. All right. Waffles Enjoyer, is Kragnos too big to be an alien? Yeah, he's on like 130 mil base. That's probably a bit too large. Realistically, because you want something that can actually move around and use the terrain. Like the monsters AI are going to want them to be going into terrain, utilizing verticality, stuff like that. Like there are monsters that want to pick people up and take them up to high spaces and drop them and do all sorts of other fun things with terrain. And that's just, you're not going to be able to do that with that pie play base, right? Like I love a big giant, I play Sons of Behemoth and have Kragnos and love him and all that stuff. I have lots of big base monsters. But no, that just ends up being too large to be functional in the game. So there you go. Okay, let's see. Dances, XCOM, X-Files, and real-life UFO lore have been mentioned as inspiration for the flavor and lore in this game, which I love. My question is this: do aliens exist, and are they already among us? I don't know. I don't know. But recent news reports seem to say maybe. I don't know, man. Who knows? The world's a crazy place.
Ancient Aliens suggests they've been here a very, very long time.
Yeah,
I think it depends.
I was hoping I could get you to spit there, Vince.
Yeah,
it kind of depends on what your definition of here is. You know what I mean? Like that's there's all kinds of different possible Yeah, there's I listen to a lot of podcasts. Let's just say that.
Sure. It's a big universe. It'd be a lot of wasted space
Indeed.
if we were truly alone. Okay. Let's see. Dr. Zephy, what was the biggest challenge when designing the game? Just making all the monsters work, because there's so many monsters. There's like 30 different monsters you'll run into over the game if you count the special the minions of force as well in there. And so like actually making them all sort of function and work with the AI and the different things we wanted them to do and the different stats we wanted them to have, so they felt like truly unique encounters, was the biggest hurdle in this game, like by far.
Yeah, the interface of the AI, which is generic to archetype, with the individual abilities itself of the discrete permutations of that archetype.
Yep, exactly. Simon Ranky, is there a mechanic to leave a mission with your guys alive if it really hits the fan? Yes. So we've been mentioning this thing your people have the option to do, which is called Call for Aid. And so as many team members as you want can attempt it every round, but you can, once you succeed in it once, you can only do it once per mission successfully. And one of the options on Call for Aid is an evac, and all your figures are immediately removed from the board and your mission over. You evac out, like you're air ripped out of the place, right? Emergency evacuation. So that's the mechanic to get you out of there. The other options on that Call for Aid are things you would expect, like drop of medical supplies, a drone strike, that kind of stuff. So it can be used offensively or sort of defensively or utility stuff. It's generally a pretty important part of like how you use your Call for Aid during a mission is going to be a pretty critical component of your success, basically. We had Tom during the demo game. There was a monster that was like just above. He was getting down, but it was getting late in the game, and they called for aid. Finally got it off. Like took them a couple times, but they got it. They got the call through. Called in the drone strike. Needed to roll 3. Rolled the 1 on the hit. Failed the drone strike. They still got him down. To their credit, they still got him down. But yeah, it can happen. Things can go wrong.
And things can go right as well. Like I think about the sniper.
Sure.
Option within bureaucracy.
Yep.
Where sometimes you'll have unexpected help.
Yes.
Now it's uncommon. Let's be honest. It's uncommon, but it can happen.
Yep. Absolutely. Jesse Lee, is the single-use gear single per mission, or is it a once and done and get a new win next mission? Once and done. You got to get a new win next mission. It's powerful use. It's powerful stuff, but that's it. You use it once and then it's done. So you requisition it over time. It's generally not something I would expect people to take as part of their starting sort of gear allotment in general, although it can be perfectly fine if you do. But it would be the type of thing you would certainly want to requisition over time, because it can be a powerful thing to have in your pocket and use when you really need it, when you run into the tough mission and suddenly have to dig deep. If you're a D&D player, you would recognize this in like potions and similar sorts of scrolls and stuff like that, when you got to dig in deep into the like oh crap bag of tricks to get yourself out of a bad situation. Right. Okay. Aaron Gudge, if you get bad clones, do you ever get good clones? Yes. I'll just say that. I'm not going to say any more to it. Oh, we got a visitor. Oh, speaking of aliens, creatures among us there. I love that that's where the cat wants to be this exact minute, right there.
Yep, on top of the computer.
Yeah. Yeah, so like in both the death and injury mechanics and in the cloning mechanics, there are all sorts of different good and bad things that may occur. When you're dealing with weird, alien, otherworldly stuff, things will oftentimes turn strange fast. That's what I'll say. There are many unusual outcomes, both positive and negative, in the death and cloning chart. So there you go. Cool. All right, very good. Let's see. I think I've got all the questions that are currently asked. So Waffles Enjoyer said yes, cats are the aliens. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Jesse Lee says, my very first mission, I foobarred a 13. Captain Crawford's no good, very bad day. Yes, indeed. Right there. Getting that second alien on your first mission out is rough. That is rough.
It's not good.
Yeah, it's a thing that'll happen a little more likely. Like that as I said, over the course of a campaign, I would expect that to happen a couple times. Rough if it's your first time out. That's going to be a tough crew. All right. Cool. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to drop them in there. Like I said, don't forget to hit like and do all that. Hey, down below are the links for everything. If you're interested in the game, want to check it out, additional videos are below, including the bat rep, including Adam's walkthrough on the tabletop menu channel, as well as our site, which has the primary loop overview video on it, as well as all the links you need to pick up the product. I haven't said this yet, it's worth saying, I suppose. The PDF itself is only $14, but you can also get the book and the PDF for $19. And for the first time, we have our completely optional supplementary game aid, the cards that contain all of the monsters and all of the base building. And those are, I don't remember what those are, Adam. Those 19, is that right?
Those are
18?
$18, I believe.
18, okay.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, really should have known that off the top of my head. Yeah, $18.
Yeah.
This Adam and I, good capitalists as always. Can't even remember
Yeah,
what we had to set the price at.
Yeah, we've not done cards before, so there's that. But it's also, we were kicking around the ideas, like this book is 20 pages longer than the last book. So the first book, Rain in Hell, was like 64 pages. The second book was like 124 pages, Space Station Zero. This one was 144 pages. So we didn't want to raise the price a ton but we kind of had to a little bit. But we do focus on specifically keeping things accessible. We've had people ask. We had a guy actually at TMX this weekend ask. He's like, "Well, why not hardcover?" And we're like, "Because it like nearly doubles the cost." And we've had people ask about color too, and that it might double the cost, but then it also makes artwork more expensive and it makes layout a whole extra thing, kind of, and all that stuff. So, yeah, we err on the side of accessibility and keeping the price cheap.
Yeah, it's not that I wouldn't love to let people have a hardcover. It's more that just like it would probably go well over $30 for the exact same book. It'd end up being like a $35, $36 book.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, and it's the exact same stuff inside, and I would just feel like we're ripping people off. Like we wouldn't be making any more money. We're just making people throw more money away on the same content, and it just doesn't feel good to me. People can spend their money however they want, but I'm like, geez, that's just like if somebody didn't know and just clicked that button accidentally, I would feel terrible. They would think they were buying like the more special edition. It's like, nope, same stuff, same 144 pages inside, just
a harder cover.
A lot of money with the cover. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Terrence Mildner says primary setting urban, woodlands, ruins. So actually, the answer is urban or wilderness. And you generate that at the start of every mission. So the very first thing you determine is the geography, and that is either a urban or wilderness mission that you're on. And then that has some very minor mechanical effects over the course of the mission. And that also then will be derivative of like the terrain that's available for that. Now, if you are very limited in the terrain you have, let me just tell you right now, and I think I say this in a sidebar as well, don't ever feel like you've got to, like we're putting an onus on you to do a certain thing. I know we have a sidebar on this. Use whatever terrain you've got. If your urban setting is full of like trees and hills and stuff like that, great. You're having a fight in Central Park, like fine. People have city or parks in the middle of cities that are full of green things. I'm okay with it, right? It's still an urban setting. I don't think anybody's gonna argue Central Park in New York isn't still an urban place, right? So you do you. Make your terrain whatever you want based on what you got. I don't want you to go out and have to spend hundreds of dollars on terrain or something silly like that.
We were using kind of, I don't want to say it was 40K terrain. We were using stuff from Battlefield in a Box at the demos that we were doing, at TMX. But they don't look like super gothic, but they don't also just look like, the type of buildings that you would have in like Marvel Crisis Protocol either. But I mean, again, there's so many different options out there. And again, you don't have to use any of them if you don't want to. You can make stuff out of cardboard. You can have stuff that you already like to use and just keep using that as well.
Yep, exactly. All right, very good. Will there be a hobby cheating for painting Men in Black? If I was smart, I would align these things better and do like a hobby video that would be related to the game we release. This is, again, we're just very bad at this.
Yeah, no, because I painted up those guys that are in the video, and I'm like, yeah, I probably should have made a video about it. It's honestly not hard. Like the guys that I did, it was just I primed them black, and then I zenithalled them from above with like a dark gray, and then I went in and just painted some details and skin and stuff like that and whatever. Dry brushed some guns a little bit. It's pretty low impact, and the reason, like the idea behind this whole concept of that the Majestic 13 troops always have a tendency to be wearing either dark gray or black, like, you know, military fatigues. It kind of is that sort of men in black sort of thing, right? But also the fact that they're wearing military fatigues, if the public sees them, which we do reference in the book, there are times when the public sees you and that kind of stuff, and that has effects on things, the way they work. You know, they'll just be like, oh, well, if they tell somebody else later, I don't know, they're just military dudes in like dark, you know, fatigues, and they had like what looked like regular guns, but they weren't regular guns. They don't know that. If you showed up in some sort of crazy sort of gear, then people would see them and they'd be like, that's, and they don't have that little thing like they do in the Men in Black movie where they can like blank your memory and stuff like that. So you have to be a little bit more wary. But then again, it just makes it very easy for you, the player, to just go out and get some regular military folks, paint them gray or black, and go to town.
Yep, exactly. How was TMX? Hope lots of fun. Oh, TMX was great. It was absolutely fantastic. Would recommend 10 out of 10. I hope everybody's there next year. We're going to do some more painting classes and stuff there like we did this year. That was a tremendously successful and just a lot of fun. Had what do we have, like full class basically all day, and all 6
Yeah,
classes,
there were
so.
there were 6 classes, 2 from Ninjon, 2 from Vince, and 2 from Sam Lenz, and there were 16 seats in each. They sold out a couple weeks before the show. And I would say that as far as paid like tickets and stuff like that, I think there were 78 people who attended, not including, because some of the people who came to the classes didn't come in and play or anything like that, so they didn't need to get a badge for the convention if they didn't want to, but some of them did as well. So it was probably more than 78, but that was the number of actual tickets like sold and stuff like that. So
Yeah, but it was a great time.
yeah.
We're gonna do it again next year. As Adam said, we'll probably split up the game release in TMX by about a week. That way we're not we're not killing poor Adam in the days leading up to that the launch. But overall, it was good. By the way, if other people have questions, drop them down in the comments below. We'll keep answering those questions here for at least a few more minutes. But overall, it was a lot of fun. It was great to introduce the game to everybody. To play through, you know, a demo and take folks through it, answer people's questions as they were there. So yeah, it was just a good time hanging out with everybody. Good to see Sam and John, obviously. So we had a ton of fun. Yeah. Did you aim for a win percentage for the players, like 80% over a campaign? Terrier Halo asks. No, not really, because the way your experience works is actually structured slightly differently. What I mean by that is there's not a hard requirement for advancement for team rating on a victory condition. I expected there to be missions that were quite bloody, where you often were rolling for death and injury on a lot of people. The way the experience works is it's like you can advance your team rating and still gain some experience, even when you quote unquote don't kill the bad guy, as it were, like to put that in the simplest terms possible. It's not like there's not a hard failure state for this. Well, I shouldn't say it. There is a hard failure state. It's your entire team gets wiped. But that's it. That's what it takes, right? You have to go that far. And so it's a pretty forgiving hard failure state. We actually, so the way we handled this was instead of just making it like this very binomial victory or loss, and like you lose everything or you gain everything setting, we pushed it way apart, so that most of the time you'll end up falling in the middle where you don't completely fail and you achieve, you know, some part of victory, and you know, now you're just trying to run up the score, right? Like how much bonus can you achieve? Like, yeah, you killed the guy, but did you kill him fast enough? Did you keep civilians from seeing it? Did you, you know, do these other elements and these other things? Did you complete your secondary objectives? How good did you do it, right? That kind of stuff. So like there's quite a variance in quote unquote what success looks like. Yeah. I just found that to be more compelling than just saying like win or lose, you know. In a
Right.
in a competitive game, you kind of have to have a hard victory condition, because it's, you know, if Tom and I are playing AOS or something, you know, it's generally a good idea in most competitive games to have some concept of who actually was the winner. Although not as necessary for me, but I think most people like that, right? Like at the
But
end of the
even
game,
then,
yeah.
in those types of games, you've got secondary objectives, and so it might be to the untrained eye, it may look as if person A won in a game like that, but actually because of victory points and this and that, maybe person B actually won. It kind of depends, as long as you don't get tabled or whatever. But yeah, with this kind of game being predominantly solo and co-op and everything, and also being designed to be played as a campaign, we're definitely looking at it from the aspect of they can't all be bangers. So you may not completely, absolutely 100% win, but you also don't necessarily 100% lose.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Cascadian, would Stargrave miniatures be good for this? Yeah, probably. Some of them might be a little sci-fi, but a lot of miniatures would be perfectly fine for this. Yeah, I mean, certainly
I swear
a lot of stuff would be good.
I'm 98% sure we mentioned them in the blog post. Those are the North Star military figures ones. I mean, some of the heads in those boxes are alien heads, and you could use them on your force models potentially. I'm going to be probably taking some of those alien heads from the Stargrave boxes and then just putting them directly on like old school, not Primaris, but like the older, like, Space Marines, like normal, like firstborn TAC Marines. And then like, boom, you've got some force people. You got to give them an alien head and like power armor, and you're ready to rock. But yeah, no, there's a bunch of different models from that North Star Figures line that I think would work fine. Again, there are some things that they carry that might be a little bit too sci-fi, but it's totally up to you.
Yeah. Jesse Lee, do AoE attacks originating from the alien wrap around corners? If my teammates are not within line of sight of the alien but are otherwise eligible, will the Ravager AI decide to do AoE attacks? Great question. This is actually something that came up earlier today that I'm going to include in the FAQ for clarification, because it's there in the rules, but it's kind of like not as clear as it should be. So this is one of those things that's like, for clarity, it's not a change to anything. The answer is no, it won't. Because anytime you're determining a ranged attack, you have to check line of sight. And if the thing is outside of line of sight, be that because it's behind a wall or hidden or anything else that could trip up line of sight, then that is not counted as a viable target, right? So regardless of the fact that it happens to be an area attack, doesn't change the fact that it still has to check line of sight. Like if the alien's not aware they're there, it's not aware they're there, right? That's basically what it comes down to. So, yep, still satisfies them. Still has to satisfy all line of sight rules for area ranged attacks. So, okay. All right. So sounds like a good chance to use different monsters that aren't seeing much use in other games. Yeah, absolutely, because anything can be an alien. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. If you believe in it enough, just like whatever you can imagine. Is there a rough min-max number range of monsters over the campaign length to squeeze them all in? Well, you're going to play about a dozen over the course of a full campaign. You're going to play about a dozen sort of programmatically generated scenarios, and so that's 12 different aliens there, and then you've got the members of Force that you'll fight, which is generally about another dozen miniatures total. So, like, if you really wanted something different for everything, you'd be talking about that many total.
Yeah. If you wanted to have, like, there are 26 monsters in the game. So if you wanted to have a model for each one of them available at any given time, depending which one you might have to play, well, there are 26, but that's a lot and it's not necessary. Like Vince said earlier, you could just use the same monster over and over again if you really wanted to. There's nothing wrong with that. Or like Tom said, you could have 3 different monsters because there's monstrosities, ravagers, and stalkers. Yep. So I keep wanting to say skulkers, and I know that's not the right word, but yeah. So I mean, and again, we didn't go through really and go, here's what the monster looks like, because A, that would have taken a lot more work on our part, and B, we want you to make the monster what you think it looks like, or maybe just what you have available.
I think it's scarier with just the description too, because then it's whatever's in your mind, right? It's like the shark underwater. Yeah. Cam B. Wait, did you help develop this game? Do you have a connection to it, or just like it as a player? Oh, no, we made this game. So Cam, this is Uncle Adam and I, and Tom was the developer for this. This is our game from Snarling Badger Studios. Uncle Adam and I's game studio. This is our 3rd game. So yeah, this is it. Just to refresh for everybody who's new, I know I saw a lot of people joining in over time. It's Majestic 13. It's our new game. It's launched. It's available now. It is an asymmetrical covert skirmish game where you play a team of 5 soldiers, basically, who are part of a faction within the Majestic 13 factions, who are trying to defend the Earth from alien invaders and monsters. So there you go. Waffles Enjoyer said, War Games Atlantic Oorah box has minis that look like good candidates for Men in Black. I think, Adam, you use those guys.
That's what I used. If you watch the videos and you see my guys fighting against the aliens and the stuff, those are Oorah models from War Games Atlantic. They work perfect because their bodies look for the most part relatively kind of normal, and their weapons, they're not necessarily M16s and AK-47s and stuff like that, but they're not like out of the realm, but they're just a little bit more futuristic, and so they worked out great actually. Those are also in the blog post on the news site, on the website, that mentioned. I think I might have mentioned them first because I think they're nearly perfect. But again, any kind of modern-y military looking people, as long as you paint them gray or black, you'll be fine.
Yep. And again, don't forget, link down below is everything you need. So the link to the full battle report, the primary loop overview, and the actual website where you can buy both the game and the optional supplementary cards. Okay. Waffles and Jordan said, "Can you fail every mission and still finish the game?" What's the statement, Tom? What's Picard's statement? It's possible to do nothing wrong and still fail. That is not.
Yes.
That's not something.
Yeah, it's possible to do everything correct and still lose.
There you go. Yes, that's not failure. That's life. Something like that.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But the answer is sure to a point. Like, if you mean fail, remember the hard failure state is everybody in your team dies. Like, you get wiped. Okay, one, that's pretty unlikely. Like, the game has some challenge to it, but my God, it's not that.
I mean, sometimes it is. Again, because you can't account for the randomness of both the foobar and the bureaucracy.
No, yeah,
because like the
You'll
way
run into
those
a bad
two
mission.
things,
yeah, but it's not like that's going to be every mission. There will be some tough missions. There will be some missions that you happen to be actually probably play a lot easier because your team is well set up. Like however you happen to construct your team, Alien shows up and they just got on the wrong train. Like it's just incorrect choice, Alien. You're just going to beat it into the ground. Like there were some playtest games I played where like just the nature of the team, I built some sort of more skewy teams, and some of those skewy teams, they'll run into certain aliens and just rinse the floor with them, but then they'll walk into a different alien and they're on the back foot immediately, right? So you have to be careful. Like a more balanced team as usual is going to give you a good experience.
There was one mission where I can wholly attribute my victory to a sniper combined with an airstrike that was hyper effective.
Sure.
It was the combination of like my team itself did almost no damage over the course of the the multi-round encounter, right? And I would not have won, period, had that dice not cut my way.
Sure.
So that just happens sometimes.
Yep. But yeah, that's the point. Like that's really what failure is getting wiped. So could you fail, quote unquote, to kill the monster and still progress over the course of the campaign? Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like that's very reasonable, right? You still drove it off or whatever, but you then had to evac and so on. You live to fight another day. Like another team's going to get called in and hopefully go clean up your mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in that sense, like any given, like there's basically 3 tiers of, like this is not a win or lose setup, because you can, like, one status or one result, let me say it that way, is that you can kill the monster. One result is that you don't kill the monster, but you still have a functioning team, right? And then the other result is everybody gets wiped, and that happens too.
Yep, absolutely. So, couple of questions here. Terrence Milner said the quote is, "You can make no mistakes and still fail." Yes, exactly. Okay. Do you have any comparable game to help me frame the general experience? If you're familiar with other miniature agnostic sort of skirmish games, then this is going to be in the same sort of vein. You're piloting around 5 figures. You're generally fighting one enemy, except in the special missions when you might be fighting multiple. So it's unusual in that there aren't a lot of asymmetrical games like this out there, where you're sort of, multiple on one. But any like even our previous games, it's primary loop wise, it's quite simple as far as how the math works. You're rolling a d20, adding a stat, and then trying to hit a target number. That's the majority of the math you have to do. Does the d20 plus this number equal this number. So try to keep it very simple. It plays pretty fast, but there's a lot of movement. It's a highly mobile game, that kind of thing. Like you will be moving around the board a lot, making a lot of different choices and actions, reacting to what the monster does. All of the aliens work on AI, so they're all going to basically want to go do certain things in their activations. The aliens will always activate multiple times in any given turn, and sometimes they might activate again, depending on each of them. All the different alien types have like a trigger that will make them activate again, and so whether or not that gets tripped can vary. Sometimes you can hold the monster to basically 2 activations. Sometimes they'll get 3, and there's a big difference in a turn where they get 3 activations versus a turn where they get 2 activations. Because alien monsters are very strong and very powerful. So it's about using like smart play and teamwork and understanding what's going on and sort of acting tactically to minimize your potential losses, basically. Because the aliens are dangerous. Klavak, this is an interesting question. I want to ask this of everybody, actually. A lot of this makes me think of Stargate, the alien of the week, the soldiers with alien guns. Was there a reference, or were you fans of the show? All right, so this is a legitimate question I want to ask everybody. First of all, the correct answer is this is the Foggate, and I have no idea. I've never even heard of that television show, which is, I'll leave that out there for folks to get or not. My answer is no. I watched the original Stargate movie, and that was it. I never watched the television show, which is a shame because I like MacGyver. He was a pretty cool dude, but I never watched the show, and he was in it. Tom, did you watch Stargate?
Nope.
No? Right.
My dad did.
You say that like you're not an old man like me, like you're some young kid. No, like
I mean, I know.
Sure. Adam, what about you? Did you ever watch the Stargate?
I watched the movie, which I enjoyed and whatnot. And I do frequently get the beginning mixed up with the beginning of Fifth Element. I don't know why that is, but in my head sometimes it gets the whole when they're in a Z's light and all that kind of stuff. And I was like telling somebody about that recently. They're like, "That's the Fifth Element. That's not Stargate." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right. No, that's not the same thing at all." But I never watched the show. No, I mean I'm aware of it. I know that it was around for quite a while, but I never did watch it.
Yeah, it's sort of in the cultural zeitgeist, but yeah, none of it was our. Apparently, it's not none of our cups of tea, I guess.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, Kurt Russell and James Spader or whatever, right, in the movie. That was great. Great stuff.
Yep.
Okay. What was your favorite part of the development cycle? Boy, that's a tough question. I mean, I really do like writing games from stem to stern. It's fun, and we have a very sort of rigorous process that goes from creation of the initial guiding principles that govern the rest of design down through outlines, build outs, write-ups, detailing, and then final fleshing out, and then into formal development and editing. So we use a pretty standard game design process. But I think in this game, writing out the factions and the bases, I think, were some of my favorite stuff. It was just fun to picture like how these people, what these sort of groups and how they operate. I don't know, Adam, what do you think? What was your favorite part?
I do enjoy the visual design part. I mean, that's kind of my area in this situation, and I like we work really closely early on in like coming up with a concept and all that kind of stuff. And then once the ball is kind of more in Vince's court, then, we meet every week, usually on Sunday nights, and then kind of go over what's gotten done this week and all that kind of stuff, and bounce, there's ideas bouncing off of each other. So I like the collaborative effect of even when in the kind of the mid parts where I'm not necessarily super involved in that kind of stuff. But we do collaborate back and forth, and then go, oh well, maybe this is that kind of thing, or does this feel right, and all that kind of stuff. And then later on, once the text is locked down and edited and everything's happy, and then for me, going into layout mode and all that kind of stuff. And if it's a normal game, unlike this game, at that point, usually the artwork's already done. Like while the development is going on, and even the late design, I'm working with whoever the illustrator is or whatever to get that stuff taken care of. Like our game last year came out in late August, and in early June is when we started getting our first couple of illustrations from the illustrator. So, I mean, we were at TMX, Vince and I was showing him some stuff that he was sending. So, you know, that was a little bit later than we would have liked, but it was due to all kinds of other circumstances. We are now trying to stick to a bit of a tighter schedule as far as launching in the late part of May, early part of June, depending. So, like, I'll be talking to the illustrators very much sooner this time than last. But the tweaking, I think, is interesting too. Like, we did Rain in Hell, we learned things from that. We did Space Station Zero, we learned things from that. We've done Majestic 13. I would like to think that we've learned things from that. And, you know, eventually we're going to get it, you know, so that it's maybe a little bit less, we don't have to learn as much. Let's say maybe that's the case, but I think we'll always be learning something.
Yep. Okay. Doctor, go ahead and drop your final questions in. We'll bring this to a close here in just a few moments because it's getting very late where I am, and I do want to make sure I don't keep my my very forgiving wife up too late here. So drop any final questions you got in, and we'll wrap up here in just a few minutes. Don't forget the links for everything down below, including the primary loop, full bat rep, everything like that's down there, as well as to buy the game. $14 for the PDF alone, $19 for the PDF plus the book, and also the optional cards that contain all the monsters and bases are $18. You can find all that in the links down below. And hit like and stuff too while you're just clicking buttons. While you're clicking around on there, hit that button too. Let's see. What was the guiding principle for this game besides aliens? Yeah, I mean, sort of alien combat, covert, that oftentimes ends up looking a bit like a word cloud. I think this one had asymmetrical skirmish was part of it, right? That was one of our guiding principles. I don't have it right in front of me. I think in there I had like something about mobility or wanting it to feel pretty dynamic. Was in the guiding principles, like everything should feel very mobile and stuff like that. Like I wanted the monsters moving a lot, the players moving a lot, like having freedom to actually explore verticality and stuff like that. So yeah.
It's really good to start with something like that. Like with Rain in Hell, it was like fast, brutal, hand-to-hand combat. Like that was kind of part of the initial kind of group of words. And with Space Station Zero, it was about exploration, survival, stuff like that. You know, and so what happens is when you have those things that you hold on to when you're doing the design, if you all of a sudden start to veer off course, you're like, does this still stick to what we were starting with or not? And then you make a decision about, well, maybe the game has evolved, or maybe you're just getting off track and you need to rein it back in again.
Yep. All right. Albion FC, if you had to grade the scenarios for fluff, 10 being Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and 1 being Monopoly, where would you put the average mission in the game? Well, they're broken up into 2 types of missions. So there's sort of programmatically generated missions, which honestly don't have a lot of story to them. I mean, it is Monster of the Week. You're out there killing a monster, so it has whatever story you assign to it, right? I don't know if I'd call it Monopoly. There's certainly something happening because you're still generating bureaucracy, which will very much and heavily potentially influence the mission and what exactly is going on. You're still generating a FUBAR event, which is a very narrative-infused thing of like something goes wild in the middle of the mission, right? So like those things all still are there and part of the game, but it's not as story driven. It's more like there's a bad guy, some weird things are going to happen. You will be able to tell a story, but it's more emergent storytelling than it is like planned storytelling. Then you have the actual special missions, which are effectively story missions. This is where Force comes in and takes a hand, right? And so this is the alien intelligence behind that's much more story driven. So there's a very distinct story that's happening, and it's, you know, you're being ambushed, they're setting you out, you're meeting a specific alien character, your base is being attacked. Like it's things are happening that you will feel the progression in the story of as this is escalating. Yes.
I would say that our games generally, if 1 was Monopoly and 10 was Warhammer Fantasy Battles, I would put us at maybe a solid 2.5 in most situations. Like we're not here to tell a story too much. You know, like in the actual book itself, which I have set right here, the actual story, the fluff at the beginning of the book is, well, there's this page here, and then there's another page here, and then there's another page here, and then that's pretty much it. Again, the special missions will tell you kind of like what's going on and give you a little bit of story there, but we're not here to. There's admittedly fluff as well about each of the 13 factions, but very short. We're not We're not like Games Workshop where we're going to write a 400-page book and 370 pages of it is going to be fluff. We're just not. That's not kind of what we're interested in. We want you guys to make up the story and then go, oh, this is cool, and it sparks something, and then it makes your headcanon fire off or whatever.
Yep. In the end, we always want to rely on sort of emergent gameplay, emergent storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's your favorite alien enemy and why? Oh boy. That is a tough question. There are a lot of enemies I really, really like. Honestly, the one I used in the battle report is pretty fun. So it's the Navite Warrior. I'll see if anybody can guess what exactly the Navite Warrior is paying homage to. Many of the alien monsters are, let's call it, subtle references to existing aliens in other media. But you know, it's subtle. But I'll see if you can tell what the Navite Warrior is supposed to be a reference to, or a light homage to. But yeah, he's one of my favorite for sure. In general, I do like a lot of the stalkers though as well. They act really weird and they're very unusual in what they'll try to do. There are a couple fun ones. The Terraformer is a particularly fun, weird alien.
Yep. The Terraformer was going to be my pick.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, Tom. Yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. No, it's good. I loved creatures, aliens that gave unusual play experiences.
Yeah.
Right. And the Terraformer would be one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Very good. I think we've gotten to the end of the questions. Jim Crimmins, how many robot squirrels will the next game have? 0. Still 0. But hold out hope, Jim. It could happen someday. Thank you very much, Ray. Thank you to everybody who asked questions. Don't forget all the links down below, everything you need to purchase the game. Don't forget to hit like. If you've got us questions, you can hit us up on Twitter. You can also join a Discord. There is a Discord to support all Snarling Badger Studios games. You can also find
just go to
link.
If you just go to snarlingbadger.com, and then up in that header, there's going to be a little Discord icon. You can click on that. They'll take you right there.
Yep. Great community full of people who are discussing the game, sharing their hobby, asking questions if they have any. So, and I'm there watching that basically 24 hours a day. So like I'm always ready to be there and help. But if you've got questions, hit us up. We're really excited about the new game. We hope you found this fun and exciting. We hope everybody has a fun playthrough. I've already seen some people sharing their hobby of like going through some initial missions and stuff like that and having a great time. So that makes me very happy. We're gonna keep trying to make great games that are a lot of fun and provide hours and hours of good experience at a low cost. That's our mission statement, our goal, and we're gonna keep at it. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate you watching. Hit all the buttons. As always, we'll see you next Wednesday.